There we go. We're recording.
We're recording.
Nice.
Good. Let's kick off. We've got a packed agenda today, so without further ado, I think the first item on the agenda is actually handing over to Brian to talk through the vendor proposal, which is a new proposal around how vendor and modules can work together. Brian, over to you.
All right. So for folks following along, the updated vendor proposal is golang.org/issue/33848. So, there's an updated proposal for 1.14. So you may recall I had a vendoring proposal for 1.13 that involved automatically updating the vendor directory and some partial vendoring fanciness. So the new proposal for 1.14 gets rid of the partial vendoring fanciness for now. I'd like to make another run at it, but it's not really as important as figuring out the rest of what's going on with vendor. And it also gets rid of the automatic updates to the vendor directory. So one thing that we realized with user feedback on various things about module mode in 1.11 and 1.12 and coming into 1.13 is that people find the implicit updates to the go.mod file pretty confusing. And I think we can justify those updates to the go.mod file on the grounds of we want things to be reproducible. But you know, if you're poking around in your vendor directory, adding print lines to things, and all of a sudden your vendor directory disappears out from under you, and all your print lines and debug statements have gone away, that would be pretty frustrating. So the new proposal is more about verifying consistency than producing consistency. So the new proposal is essentially that we record just enough information, just enough extra information in vendor/modules.txt that we can figure out whether it is in sync with the module graph as determined by the main module's go.mod file. And if it's not in sync and we're doing a build operation, then we're just going to error out. We're going to say, no, this isn't right. There's something wrong. You need to rerun go.mod vendor. And then it's up to the user to blow away all of their temporary changes. And so enough information to do that consistency check is basically just knowing which root modules were mentioned explicitly in the go.mod file, in the top level main module go.mod file, and then which replacements were in the go.mod file. And if we have those two pieces of information, then the entire rest of the module graph is fully determined by those. So at that point, we just have to go through the go.mod file and the vendor/modules.txt file and make sure that they match. And if they do match, then we assume that if you made any edits to the files in the vendor directory, that's totally on you. Like, we're not going to stop you from making intentional edits. But this will stop you from making unintentional edits where you change something about the go.mod file and you run your vendored build and you say, oh, I just ran go get, why isn't this changing anything? So you'll actually see an error message at that point. Most of the rest of the proposal is just details about how that will work. So we have the additions to the vendor modules.txt file. We have to be a little bit careful about how we do that so we don't break the parsers on older Go releases. There's some question about when to trigger it. Should we trigger it when the modules.txt file has the explicit dependency annotations? Should we trigger it when the Go directive in the go.mod file says Go 1.14? Some combination of the two. I'm not entirely certain. It doesn't matter a whole lot to me. If you have opinions, please express them on the issue. And finally, we're talking about adding another mod flag, because if we're turning on mod equals vendor by default, if we meet whatever these conditions are, then we need some way to turn it back off again. And right now we don't have a mod equals some non-empty string that means mod equals do the normal thing and don't use the vendor directory. So we're going to add that. We thought about a bunch of words, a bunch of possible words other than mod equals mod. We thought about like mod equals auto or mod equals update or whatever, but we thought that those would be more confusing than the kind of silly mod equals mod, like turn module mode back on kind of flag. Yeah, so we also considered mod equals cache, but we thought that might be confusing because people might think that meant use only what's already in the cache. We thought about mod equals direct, except that that's confusing with go proxy equals direct. We thought about mod equals global would confuse people with like, oh, is it going to read from a global go.mod file somewhere? So we've got all these other words that lots of people had suggested. Mod equals really. I like that suggestion, Daniel. Anyway, so there's a lot of possible words. We can kind of paint that bike shed, but so we kind of settled on mod equals mod as kind of silly, but probably less confusing than the other options. So that's most of that. So that'll be enough to let you run things like go list on the stuff in your module. It'll let you run go build on the stuff in your module, go test on the stuff in your module. It will not let you do bigger, like broader module analysis. It won't let you do go mod Y. It won't let you do go mod graph. It won't necessarily even let you do go list dash test because the test dependencies of your transitive dependencies might depend on things that are not vendored. So we're not proposing to expand the contents of the vendor directory beyond what's already what GoMod vendor already provides. We're just proposing to use it and to check it for consistency. So this protects you against. Daniel asks, isn't turning this on by default going to break some? I lost the rest of the sentence, but essentially some users who are already scripting things. Yes and no. It will fix some people who are currently broken. It will possibly break some users who are not setting the mod flag at all today. The easy fix for them will be to set dash mod equals mod in their Go flags. Mod equals mod or mod equals read only. I think a lot of folks who have CI scripts are already passing mod equals read only, which will override the automatic mod equals vendor trigger anyway. Let's see. So what does this not do? It does not check to make sure that you haven't modified the files that are in your vendor directory. I know that's been requested in a couple of places. I think it's an important use case. It's also a lot more expensive than just comparing the go.mod file to the modules.txt file. Like right now, it's right now the proposed cost is essentially O of n with the length of the go.mod file. To actually verify directory contents, we would have to actually open those files and read them and hash them and do all that kind of stuff. We need to do a lot of that for caching anyway, but the major source of changes that I'm worried about is changes to the go.mod files. And if the go.mod files change, then we would end up having to load the entire transitive graph anyway. Things would break. So for intentional edits that users make to the contents of the vendor directory, the short-term solution is just rerun GoMod vendor and see if it's a no-op. The longer-term solution is we would like to make GoMod verify actually verify the contents in your vendor directory if it's present too. That has its own separate tracking issue, so it's not part of this proposal, but it is definitely still on the table and it's still on our minds. So that's a brief overview. Again, it's number 33848 if you want to look at the gory details, and I would be happy to entertain any questions or comments that folks have at this point. I know I just posted it yesterday, so a lot of folks are probably still digesting too.
Thanks, Brian. I think it's a really clear proposal, and sort of sets out the background nicely for those people who have been following on previous issues. One question I've just got, and maybe this can sort of kick things off in terms of the questions, is what is the process from here as far as this proposal is concerned? Is there any particular type of feedback you're looking for from people? Is there particular things you're looking to try out? And sort of that's a slightly leading question, is there a way that we can get access to a CL which implements this, and so people can help to sort of flush out any rough edges that there might be as part of it? Sorry, there were about 3 or 4 questions there, but hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start at the end and work backwards. So as far as a concrete CL to try it out, that should be pretty straightforward to produce, although I don't have one yet. I'm still tying up a bunch of loose ends from 1.13 release. So there is no implementation so far, but if you want a little bit of preview about some of how it works, if you go into the standard library today and you run commands, the standard library has its own vendor directory. And it has a version of this consistency check that's not quite as precise as what I'm proposing here. It makes some assumptions about the go.mod file containing all of the transitive dependencies, and those assumptions don't actually hold in modules in general. But it kind of gives you a taste of, like, working in the standard library would kind of give you a taste of what it would be like to work with this sort of vendor mode of operation. From here, it goes to, there's the proposal process. There's a group of folks that review proposals. So I would guess it will probably be a few weeks before they get to it. I have already run this by the key stakeholders on the Go team, and before the last round of drafts to make the thing consistent, it seemed like folks were generally happy with it on the Go team. So I would not be surprised if it gets a few more revisions based on information that we find. But I'm not aware of anyone who thinks it's a terrible idea at this point. So what we're looking for, I think, at this point is, are there edge cases that we're missing? Are there migration paths that this is going to break? So like Daniel's concerned with, are there integration tools that turning this on by default is going to interfere with in a negative way? Are there major use cases that we're missing that are not tracked separately? So that's, I guess that's most of it. I'm more interested in questions that we haven't considered than in questions that we have. So there was a question about GoList, but I couldn't read the sentence before it disappeared.
Marwan, do you want to just jump in?
Yeah, sure, I can read it out loud. I was just wondering if GoList will also like follow that rule, and therefore GoPlease will automatically like have the go-to definition go to the vendor folder file.
Yes.
Sounds good.
I guess there are some other folks on the call as well. Giovanni, I've just spotted you joined as well, who've previously been involved in conversations in the other issues. Please just jump in, folks, if there's any questions you want to raise now.
Yeah, hello, Giovanni. I do have a question, actually. Probably I missed just the first minute, so maybe it's been already discussed. But when you say in the proposal that this proposal will not support, you say the vendor directory will not support analysis of the module graph. So go list-m or go mod-y-m and so on. What do you mean by will not support? Would you mean that it failed, or that the result will not basically read the vendor directory?
That's not entirely clear to me. I think we'll probably.
Brian, is the question not clear, or the point that Giovanni's brought up, not the answer to it not clear?
I think the answer is not clear. So I think any of the mod commands like gomod graph or gomod y will just use module mode and ignore the vendor directory. That's in line with what the mod command does today. If you do like gomod, if you have mod equals read only. The go list commands, I think, will probably fail if they don't have enough information to complete the request. There's a little bit of kind of a funny edge case where go lists -json will have some fields that I think today are populated on a best effort basis when mod equals vendor is set, and they will probably continue to be populated in the same way. So if there is a package that's in the vendor directory, then you'll probably be able to go list information about that package. You may be able to go list very limited information about the module containing that package. You probably will not be able to do things involving more esoteric fields populated by go list with the -m flag, for example.
Giovanni, were there specific use cases that you had in mind of tools that either direct invocations of go list or tools that use go list under the covers?
Yeah, I don't have any specific use case because I actually try to imagine this possible world, which is not here yet. So I'm not sure exactly on the problem. So the general comment is that it's weird that some command can change meaning or results depending on whether you're using vendoring or not. Meaning that some third-party tools you use on your source code could be affected and work or not work depending on whether you're using vendoring or not, because some commands are changing their behavior. This is surprising, but then at the same point, I'm not sure if the commands being affected by these are actually affected in a way to break some tools.
Does actually getting a CL, a working CL, help us to sort of flush that out? Is that I'm just wondering, is there another way that you'd suggest of taking that forward?
Probably, or we can just try the way it is like now, and then if something breaks, we can fix it up in further releases or something.
Yeah, so in general, I would expect queries that talk about packages to work fine. Switching over to use the vendor directory. I would expect queries that involve modules to mostly not work. I think we'll have to wait and see whether that restriction is fine for most tools or whether it's a problem in practice. There was one other question that I wanted to address. Somebody was asking about the gomod vendor operation blowing away stuff that's already vendored. I think we can consider changes to that. I would like to consider those separately from the so if you have a particular issue with gomod vendor blowing away stuff that's already vendored, I think we can probably consider that separately for the most part.
Did anybody else have any sort of dying questions they wanted to get out now? Otherwise, I guess, Brian, the best place to follow up is via the issue tracker.
Yep.
Silence. And so let's just assume we can move on for now. Thanks ever so much, Brian. The next thing, Ian, I don't know whether you wanted to sort of take over from here, and Ian and team on sort of any updates from the GovCon action items from the 2 sessions we had at GovCon San Diego this year.
Yeah, I can follow up on that. Basically, from the sessions, the main things that we kind of did were make the issue about build tags so that we can kind of start getting information from people about build tags and their use cases. So I just kind of compiled that into document, and then and then the second thing was that we had the list of blocking issues, like things that we have to do before Go Please can be v1.0. And from that point, so build tags is one of those things. And so we have kind of a document, and actually I created a milestone, thanks to your suggestion, Paul, for tracking all the issues that we have open that are that need to be fixed before we can be v1.0. So that's pretty much the majority of things that we've been doing, just kind of trying to understand what has to be done and sort of trying to work through that. And then also from that stuff, I've spent a bit more time looking at VS Code and the editor integration with VS Code to understand the things that we should do to make the editor experience better from a VS Code perspective. So I spent a bit of time doing that, and that'll hopefully allow me to understand it better for other editors too. That's mostly what I've been doing. Ian, do you want to talk about what?
And then I've been doing a lot of work on documentation. I submitted a CL today that has a fairly large amount. We should do more, but I think we're in a better state to kind of be able to point people at sensible documentation rather than having to answer every single individual query in Slack. It's also an experiment in the conversations we had at GoFCon about using committed markdown instead of the wiki. So we'll see how that goes. I think it should be interesting. And then the other thing I've been doing is talking to quite a few people about what it means to support debuggers well in editors, what we should do about it, what the path forward is for us supporting Delve better and integrating it with editors better. There's no real conclusions there, but there's a lot of conversations still happening.
That's awesome. The only thanks, because I think that covers almost all of the points. The only one question I think is sort of related to the two updates you gave on documentation on, Rebecca, you saying you were sort of understanding the VS Code experience a bit better is we concluded, I think, in those GoFCon sessions that what we mean by Go Please version 1.0.0 is actually there being a decent first cut of something we can say to the editor plugin writers, here we go, we've got something, quote, stable. And as part of that, we also talked about identifying those editor plugins for each of the editors, identifying the owners of those, and actually sort of documenting, ensuring that when we bless, if you like, each of those editor integrations, that there's a good process behind users reporting errors, users being clear how to get started, etc. i.e. the signposting for where to get started with Go Please really starts with the editor integrations, and there's a blessed list of those. Has there been any progress on that side of things? Because I think, Ian, that feeds very much into the whole documentation side of things around Go Please.
Yeah, so in the documentation that I submitted, one of the markdown files is intended as user documentation, and the first thing in that file is a list of editor links. And my intention is to basically have that tell you the state of each of those editors as well, like which version of Go Please it's been tested up to, whether it's fully blessed or known to work but not fully blessed, or some kind of state, so you can look at that list and see the state of editors and their integrations with Go Please. And then each of the individual files are kind of broken up so that they can kind of be owned by the plugin author themselves, and they can make that file tell the user what they need to know to use that plugin correctly.
Fantastic. So that's really the entry point for the bulk of users of Go Please, even though they might actually not be knowing they're using Go Please. How does that sit with effectively documentation for these editor plugins, the source of truth likely being elsewhere? So for example, for VS Code Go, the documentation on how to get up and started with, dare I say, Go Please in VS Code with Go, it actually lives elsewhere.
Yeah, and it probably should, and I think the two will probably link to each other.
Okay, perfect. That documentation CL looks good. Is there anybody else on the call who had any sort of, I'm sorry, slightly dominated with questions there. Any thoughts on any of those updates from the GoFCon sessions? Daniel, I guess just to call out that you've got a proposal that we might get to later on how to, that relates to Ian's point about the wiki being a bit too general editing, but we can come to that later on. Michael, was there anything on the Go packages side of things? One of the questions you asked at GoFCon was, are there any outstanding issues? Was there anything that was flushed out by that?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I neglected responding to that email that was thread that was started about performance. But the general sense that I got was the main problems were that the load modes weren't even more fine-grained than they are now. And as they are now, it's very complex and kind of buggy. So I don't think we'll be making any changes on that front. I think there was a request to maybe like do more fine-grained type checking. That's something that might be solved with this refine idea that Ian had, where you get all the raw data and then you can kind of like pick stuff out of it before you do the actual type checking. So that might be a solution to that. But I guess the high order information on this is I don't know that the performance is going to improve significantly anytime soon, just because we're kind of tied to loading the information. Well, we're A, tied to loading the information that GoList gives us, and B, like it's hard for us to give more precise way to select what's done for dependencies without making things even more confusing and complicated, which is kind of an unsatisfactory answer, but that's kind of where we are.
Well, it's a straw man, if nothing else, that if anybody disagrees with, they can knock over from here.
Yeah. I'll send a reply to that thread later today or this week, saying as much. There was something else on that thread about making changes to the AST. And I don't know if suggested fixes and analysis framework would work for that, but I think it was Fatih who asked about that. But yeah, so that's kind of the main follow-up that I have on the stuff from GopherCon.
On a related note, I'm going to speak for Jay, who isn't here. I was talking to him about the performance of Go packages and the fact that it's limited by the performance of GoList. And he was saying he thinks there's a fair amount of elbow room to make GoList faster if we really need to, but it's a lot of work. So it needs a compelling case to prioritize it over other work. And Go Please doesn't make it a compelling case because we're not really bounded by the cost of GoList at this point, as far as we know.
Again, that's just a useful line in the sand for people to disagree
Exactly.
with.
So yeah, so if somebody knows of a case where it's costing them, speak up, because we don't know, and it won't get faster unless you tell us.
I can say a lot of code generation tools are suffering from this, and I can name a few later. But because they're not like Go Please. They're more like sort of protobuf stuff, GraphQL stuff, where you generate a bunch of code that makes the workflow like a lot slower than it used to be.
Okay.
Yeah, should we, Marvin, do you mind if we just pick that up if we've got time in any other business? Because I think that actually feeds into a point we talked about at GovCon anyway, about how in the future code generation could be much tighter integrated into Go Please, but that then opens the question of extensions, blah, 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 blah. And that's the only other thing was, Julie, did you want to chat about the discovery site?
Yeah, so since GopherCon, basically that was when we launched our trusted testers. And since then we basically just added a bunch of people and have been getting feedback and have just periodically been working on it. We also posted an issue on the tracker where in the future we'll be posting like any other public updates. So hopefully that'll be a useful source of communication. But other than that, we're mainly just working towards our public launch.
Fantastic. And that is just upcoming once you're sort of working through a number of issues, I guess. Any specific things that are outstanding and that you're working through that are sort of like blockers, dare I say?
Yeah, so I think there's a list of features that we had talked about. I think the main things are just like performance. So we want to be able to do some load testing and make sure that we can actually like handle whatever load is coming our way. We want to be able to add a module view and a directory view to the site. So right now it's just a packages discovery site, which means that if you go to like /pkg/golang.org/x/tools, it will 404 because it's not technically a package. And so just handling all the routes like that. There's a lot of just like cleanup with the handling the Go standard library itself, just because it behaves differently than other third-party packages or modules. So, and there's some stuff with just populating popular packages. I think those are our main categories.
Sorry, I dropped off there, so apologies if you were waiting for me. That's awesome, thank you. I'm sure I'll pick up I think we chatted through those details at GopherCon UK, and I'll just make sure I get all that minuted in the notes. Is there anybody had any questions? Please just jump in, either just by dropping a note in or just interrupting. Otherwise, we'll press on. Rebecca, did you want to talk in a bit more detail about, you mentioned it before, those blockers for v1.0.0? Is there anything you want people to be doing, whether they be the editor integrators or users of Go, please?
Sure. Yeah. I guess there's not too much. They're pretty much all. So I marked them all as milestones yesterday. So if anyone wants to go look at what those are, you can look at the like Go Please v1.0 milestone. The main things are like, for the most part, they are things that we've been kind of talking about, like the watching changed files and like some like various just handling large files or handling many files in one package, things that like just have to work before we can have v1.0. But I guess if anyone has anything that is like bugging them about Go Please that they haven't voiced yet, I think that would be worth, like, if there's anything in that list of issues that are marked as milestones that you think is missing, then please, and like, or any issue that you would like to be marked as a milestone requirement, then please like do that or comment on it. I think that would probably be the main thing. Like, these are just kind of my guesses of like what we discussed at GopherCon and then just what we thought. And so I went through every issue and kind of marked it what I thought was appropriate or not. But if you think there's other stuff that I didn't notice, please let me know. I think that's the main thing.
Okay, I'll make sure that message, that clearly if anyone reading the notes, that's sort of the key punchline from all of that there. It sounds like there's been plenty other stuff going on. Oh, hang on, message there. Haven't looked at yet how file watching is being. Duco, do you want to just jump in, Duco?
Yeah, sorry, I haven't looked at the file watching yet, but basically, is there any kind of idea of what kind of volume of files that for the watching and basically that we were aiming for as in the v1.0 release, kind of from a benchmarking perspective? I know, for example, that VS Code has a tremendous history of not dealing well with large workspaces. And I like literally I'm suffering from a daily basis. Like I can't watch my workspace. I just have to fall back on old behavior. So it just was kind of a curiosity question from that perspective. No need to go into in depth now, but it's one of the things that would be in my mind from the file watching perspective.
So Muir's been working on it. I actually haven't looked at it at all. I don't know if Muir has any thoughts, or Ian looked at that CL last week, right?
Yeah, I know what's in the CL if Muir isn't talking. At the moment, it globs from workspace folders down all Go files.
Okay. Yeah.
But how that's implemented is entirely up to the editor. It uses the editor's file watching, it doesn't do it internally at all.
Okay, so that's actually a critical point. In this case, it's more than should be directed to VS Code, which like for 3 years already has had significant issues with that.
Exactly.
Cool.
Good
Thanks.
to know. Okay, so we can like thanks for like alerting us to that, so we can monitor it or whatever and see how it's working.
I can actually direct some issues from the VS Code GitHub basically keep repeating it and there's no real action taken on. But I'll try and mail them over or send them on one of the Go Please GitHub issues.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any? Hang on, I've skipped over one thing. Dare I say, has there been any development progress on the extensions front? Did we sort of park that mentally at GopherCon? I'll just wait. We can just leave it as parked unless there's any specific updates you wanted to
Yeah,
talk
I think the conclusion was there's no way we're going to do anything before 1.0, and I don't believe it's significantly there's nothing that we need to change about 1.0 because of a design for it. So we're just going to park it completely until we're past that milestone.
Sounds good. There was one comment in an issue about workspace and build tags that I'm just opening up now. That I think that falls under, beg your pardon, that falls under the build tags sort of use case enumeration that you talked about earlier on, Rebecca. Ian, the one other question that's sort of any update on the big rewrite? I don't even know how to refer to that properly. Is it done? It's in sort of various CLs, I guess, that have already been merged.
Yeah, it's flying up the stack. I've all the remaining work I've kind of handed over to Rebecca now. So.
Yeah. So like basically, the like half of it is kind of done. So like half of it is actually the CL that caused the issue that you were talking about yesterday. The like issue with the context cancellation that's caused by that first half of the rewrite. So I'm still working on figuring it out. But basically so the package, like the types information is being cached in like the new system, but the like cache invalidation part isn't yet being handled by the new system. So that's kind of what I'm in progress of working on. And to do that, I've been changing the source package, which uses the before it was using like the Go token package to handle position information, and then we realized that was causing a lot of race conditions. So now I'm rewriting it to use like the actual LSP types of positions. So that's kind of the step in between going to the next part.
Got it. And this all sort of falls under the v1.0.0.
Yes. Yeah, that has to be done before.
Okay.
So yeah, basically just making the cache invalidation work using the new system.
So effectively, if there are any sort of stability points that people are seeing, they could be sort of transitionary stability issues, which are going to be solved by this big rewrite. Let's just continue to call it that, which is going to land and be polished up for. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and if anyone's seeing those context canceled errors, comment on those issues, because I can't reproduce them super consistently, so it would be helpful. Yeah.
Anybody got anything else on the Go Please side of things that they wanted to bring up now? Otherwise, we can switch on to other things. An awkward silence. So on that, let's move on to Go packages and Go analysis. Michael, I think you gave any specific updates you want to add beyond what you talked about from GopherCon earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, so
a very successful talk at GopherCon UK.
Thank you. For those of you who missed that talk, suggested fixes, which were like really extremely experimental, are now not anymore. So you should try them out. And the variant of the checker tools that is in Go Analysis now supports this fix flag that you can use to run all the suggested fixes that are generated as if like they're refactorings, like automatically update your tools. So try playing around with that. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. So that's my main announcement. Try it out.
Cool. Julie, anything to add? I think you probably covered everything Discovery side earlier on. I just have it as an agenda item here, but I think. Okay. Otherwise, we're then sort of on to any other business. So let's just try and canter through that. We mentioned it earlier on. Daniel, do you want to talk about your proposal to move mature wiki content behind Gerrit? Not specifically tools related, but worth discussing here, particularly given Ian's comments earlier.
Yeah, so I just pasted a link on the chat. That link will let anybody make comments or suggest edits. So please do. I plan on submitting it in a few days. I need to talk to Carmen because I believe she has a related proposal in the works. This is mainly just about having the content that's important and relevant and needs to be reviewed and taken care of having it behind Gerrit, because the wiki is just not a good tool for it. At least the GitHub wiki isn't. So if anybody has any input, or for example, examples of pages that are important enough or relevant enough that should also be behind Gerrit, please let me know and comment on that document.
Cool. Thank you very much.
I'll take the silence as no input.
There are some related things. So you can look at the Go Please stuff as an experiment in doing this. We suffered from 2 separate vandalisms to the wiki yesterday, which make these kinds of ideas much more important because it's really infuriating to have to restore wiki vandalism all the time. And the thing to note that's kind of almost a side effect, but an important one of these changes, is that to make changes to the committed markdown, you have to go through code review, which is a good thing, but you also have to assign the CLA, which is also a good thing because it means the contents of the new wiki are something that are owned by the Go project and can be redistributed by the Go project in a way that the wiki cannot be. So I think there are some other benefits as well. And possibly those benefits.
But if we do that thing with the CLA, then we have the issue where we cannot move content, right? Because then content from the wiki.
No, because, well, it depends on the content. Any content that was created by somebody that has signed the CLA, it applies to the wiki even though you didn't have to sign it to get to the wiki.
What?
So, for instance, like the modules page is not covered by the CLA because it was written by the PUDs who has not signed the CLA. So we would have to talk to the PUDs about that. But some of the other pages are covered. So it's an interesting place, but yes.
I think the general idea of it trying to improve the quality of the content is, I'd struggle to find anyone who's going to disagree with that, particularly when, if we take the modules wiki as an example and all the work that the PUDs has put into that, that sort of fits into, I guess, the wider issue that Jay raised as well, about the module documentation in 1.14, Brian, and those two sort of coming together in some way, shape, or form. So I think the wiki has in the past served as a useful garden, if you like, for things to start growing, but they quickly outgrow that. And it just seems like we haven't taken that next step with some of these more important ones. So I think it's a good proposal for what it's worth. Cool. Okay, thank you, Daniel. I guess anybody else can follow up with any comments in the document that you linked. Ian, the next issue is one that you've already discussed, and that's the Go Please documentation CL. Anything you wanted to talk about on that front?
I guess the only thing I'd say is that I've done quite a lot, and I think it's a good start. There is more to do. Contributions are welcome. Suggestions and complaints are also welcome.
I don't think any of the... Oh, actually, the PUDs did ping me a note before the call. The one other question is, with 1.13, are we sort of comfortable that, Brian, this is maybe a question more directed at you, with people now by default interacting with the proxy, are we comfortable that the error messages that people might encounter with issues with the proxy are sort of flagging to people enough of things that places they should go and look for help, and or sort of descriptive error messages? I know that's a totally vague point to have raised, but and it was one that we discussed a bit at GopherCon in the session with Katie when we were talking about the modules proxy. But is that something that with 1.13 you sort of feel like we've got a good handle on? People know where they're going to go if they've had issues?
I think our situation with error reporting in 1.13 is certainly not made significantly worse by the proxy. So it's important to bear in mind that the default Go proxy is the public proxy followed by a direct fetch. And so generally the errors that people are going to see are not the proxy errors, they're the errors from the direct fetch. And those are going to be certainly no less useful than they were in 1.12. And a lot of them will actually be a lot better than they were in 1.12 because Jay put a lot of effort, and I also toward the end put a lot of effort into cleaning up a lot of the more confusing error messages to make them more useful. So I think a lot of the cases where we've seen people get confused about the errors coming from the proxy are users who are on 1.12 who have explicitly opted into the proxy and don't have the option to do this direct fallback, where you're getting the proxy, you're getting the opaque, like the proxy returned an error from the path in the go command that doesn't yet propagate error messages from proxies, and not getting the more detailed, like, oh, here's what happened when I tried to do it myself. But in 1.13, you get the more detailed message when it tries the fallback.
I totally forgotten that as a point. And I guess you've already had some exposure to messages and errors that people have been running into with the beta, and with the release candidate coming up, that'll give a bit more exposure to it as well.
Yeah, and I do have an OpenCL for 1.14 to actually plumb the error messages through from the proxy. I'm a little worried about the injection attack surface that exposes, so that's not going to be backported to 1.13.
Cool. I think that we're pretty much done on anything that was listed on the agenda. Does anybody else just want to jump in with anything they've got today?
Yes, got one, and maybe just as a side note. I have been talking with people from the probably relatively big, well-known Prometheus project for the metrics. They want to adopt Go modules, or they have adopted Go modules. They're having issues, well, as you had any monolithic projects where they make breaking changes to their internal packages, but they haven't made them actually internal. And so they want to split it out, just like Kubernetes went through it as well with their staging repositories and different nested modules. So I've been trying to talk to them, kind of coming up with some solutions for their migrations, because they want to keep it as minimalistic as a solution as possible, obviously to keep kind of contribute and speed up. So I've been running up a proposal for a kind of a community tool to help with this. I'm probably going to post it in the tools channel pretty soon, kind of a high-level doc with some implementation details. Basically, it's automatic. What it comes down to is automatically splitting out subtrees of packages and their dependencies into, and then basically maintaining separate, automatically separate repositories, which are these modules basically, and people can depend on instead of depending on the core project for these libraries. It's kind of very high level. So, but I basically want to say, if anybody has any other ideas or has been talking about, I'm not aware, obviously, of everything that might have been discussed in the past around this topic. If anybody has around that, I'd be happy to get more insight into it or get feedback once I present it as a document.
Marwan, you had something from earlier on. I'm sorry, I've totally forgotten what it was.
I forgot to. I think it was about the code generation thing.
Code generation, yeah. Is that, sorry, I had a quick question about that. That's not specifically with a view to integrating it into Go Please. It's just code generators that previously ran in Go Path mode are now running slower in modules mode. Are they using Go packages? Is it a Go packages performance issue that we want to be flagging to Michael?
It's basically that. Like if you're writing a code generator for any purpose, which I have a few examples of, like out there in production, they use Go packages, which uses Go lists, and that's why it's gotten slower when they migrated to Go packages.
Michael, is there some story to pick up there with Marwan on those specific ones? Because to be honest, I haven't noticed a significant, if you just do one Go packages call at the beginning, of say the code generator, i.e. you establish the scope of types and syntax trees that you require at the beginning and just do that once, I haven't noticed any significant impact personally, but maybe there's a story for much larger projects, etc., that I'm just missing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing more about the specifics, but it's not super surprising to me. I mean, we have to do more work because we're using like Go list, and especially if you're generating lots of stuff across different packages, you're reloading those same packages over and over and over again. So like, it's a lot of redone work.
My intuition would be that actually that's dominated by the work of loading syntax trees and type information and not go list, but maybe that's just too superficial. If you've got any, Marwan, if you've got any specific examples, I guess it makes sense to contribute to Michael that thread that you raised on Go packages.
Yeah, or just reach out to me directly. That might be a faster way of getting a response.
There was one tool that I helped somebody port to Go packages. I can't remember which one. And they'd done a relatively simple port where they'd replaced calls to the loader with calls to Go packages. And it was hideously slow because there's approximately a fixed overhead per call to Go packages load. And they were getting the same information every time anyway. So changing it to make one call at the start and then reuse that information made it considerably faster than the old version. So it may be that we're seeing that again, or it may be there's actually a case where making Go list fast is the only reasonable solution. So yeah, investigate it with us.
I was going to say, if you're happy for people to ping messages to go the mailing list and or the Slack channel, that's certainly a good starting point for those discussions, I guess, Ian.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
The example that I have that I work with every day is a library called GQLGen, and I can make a reproduction with it and maybe just send it to Michael directly.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good.
Cool.
For one of just in case other people are running into it, it may be worth, but Michael, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, raising an issue for it. At least that way other people can see these things being discussed and how they're resolved as well, which might be useful.
Yeah.
Anybody got anything else?
One last comment, and this is mostly for Brian, but I know he's typing, so I don't want to interrupt him. I know he's gonna. I know he has some big changes planned for 1.14. So just one minor comment: if these changes land on master, please let us know so we can test them quickly and thoroughly. Because otherwise, some people might not run master and realize things have been changed.
Okay, will do.
Particularly that, I guess it goes without saying, if that vendor plus module CL lands at some point, then the more eyes we can get on that, the better. Okay, Ian, team, anything from you?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Great, thank you very much, everybody. I'll try and do a quick write-up of the notes and publish them along with the recording as soon as possible afterwards.
Nice. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.